compelling detective story, a cloak and dagger action, and a romantic drama, all these stories were taken from real life. The history of Kazakhstan is inseparable from the world history. Reflections on History, our version.
The Battle of Borodino by Malik Gabdullin. A signal was given and troops launched an attack. This is a reconstruction of the Battle of Borodino, one of the bloodiest battles in the beginning of the 19th century. Kazakh young men also fought in the battles during the French invasion of Russia and upheld their honor. Malik Gabdullin mentioned in his manuscripts that heroism was a typical of Kazakh people. The signal was given for everyone to gather under the standard of their detachment again. The battle ended and Kutuzov's troops started retreating. In the beginning, Soviet troops retreated too, and the battlefields were the same. Both wars had something in common. Both were patriotic and each soldier had his own Borodino. When writing this, I recalled Denis Davydov's words. I remember that in our eyes, the division approaching us from the cloud of dust and smoke was covered with sweat and the blood of honor. Their bayonets gave off rays of immortality. There was massive bloodshed in Borodino and Sharyeva villages. War is work. They shed blood and were covered in sweat and dirt on the front line. The scales must be weighed in favor of those who fought against this evil. Chapter 1. Epic literature becomes factful. Tell the Kazakh soldiers to fight against the enemy the same way you do. They must rush forwards like wind, and their sabers must cut even the stones the enemy walks on. In the year of the 70th anniversary of the victory, Malik Gabdullin would have turned 100. In distant 1941, the future writer, scientist and hero was only 26. He was studying Kazakh epic literature. He was doing his thesis on the problem of inaccuracies in research on Koblandi's Batyr's epic poems. He was going to submit it in 1942. Everything changed on June the 22nd. Instead of submitting his thesis, he had to defend his homeland. He fought in the war voluntarily. The headquarters of the famous 316th Division, led by Panfilov, were in Almaty School number 19. You can see a tab on the collar. It's not a shoulder strap. The tabs have badges. The captain wore one rectangular badge and the majors wore two rectangular badges. My uniform is the same as the 316th Division commanders and chiefs' uniforms. A person had to serve a lot and survive to become a captain or a major. Even Bauyrzhan Momyshuly, a battalion commander who later became a regiment commander, was only a senior lieutenant at the time. They underwent short training and baptism of fire in Volokholamsk. It was announced that Gabdullin and his soldiers had met a heroic death, but they survived and broke out of the encirclement together. And January 1942 came. If we get back to Borodino and control all of the roads, we will be able to increase the pressure on the enemies. In this case, the Germans will not be able to use these roads to provide the encircled units with ammunition, food, transfer military units, or rescue the wounded. I have decided to entrust the task of destroying the German garrison to the 2nd Battalion and your submachine gunners. At 2 a.m., Borodino must belong to us. These are the regiment commander Bauyrzhan Momyshuly's words, retold by Malik Gabdullin. Three of Kazakhstan's writers, Momyshuly, political commander Gabdullin, and senior lieutenant Snegin, were retaking Borodino from the Germans at Demensk bridgehead. These men were Panfilov soldiers. Bauyrzhan Momyshuly, Malik Gabdullin, Tolgan Takhtarov, Ramazan Ilibayev, who was the author of the Jazz Kazakh Soldiers Anthem, and other soldiers were in this division. The soldiers executed the order given by the regiment commander. However, this Borodino was completely different. It was called the Myansk Pocket in the Leningrad region. Hitler was going to start a victorious offensive against Moscow there. At the end of December 1941, the headquarters of the German Army Group Center sent telegrams ordering not to retreat because Napoleonic retreat is threatening to come true. Chapter 2. The Roar of Cannonade. As usual, in such moments, time was crawling. It was freezing before dawn broke. However, it did not seem that any of us felt cold. Hearing, vision, every nerve and every muscle was strained to the limit. Gabdullin became a writer because of the war. However, he did not describe a lot of everyday details in his books, but he mentioned his friends' names as he wanted to perpetuate the memory of them. Real people live in his works, and real events are described there. He wrote that he had worked on these sketches in dark corners and destroyed houses when the roar of artillery cannonade was heard and the storm of bullets was whistling overhead. In January 1942, the offensive was launched. Panfilov's soldiers, as a part of the Third Army, moved to the town of Kolm. Their aim was to encircle the enemy troops. 6 SS motorized divisions of SS Totenkopf, which is Deadhead, were in the Demansk Pocket too. SS Totenkopf was commanded by Theodor Eki, the former commander in the Dachau concentration camp. Only select people were in the division. All of them were of Aryan ancestry, at least 178 centimeters tall, morally and mentally stable. They were hardy and willing to submit. These people were members of the elite. Fascism was also a kind of ideal at that time, otherwise it would have been impossible to alter consciousness and convince so many people to fight in such a major bloody war. Walter von Brockdorff-Ehlfeld commanded the formation. An interesting fact is that Count Demansky, as comrades called him, did not like Hitler and was against National Socialism. However, these did not prevent him from executing civilians by hanging and shooting. In winter 1942, they often recalled the Napoleonic campaign. General Frost obviously did not support the Nazis. The SS officers reported that the soldiers and the officers had overstretched themselves and were mentally exhausted. They suffered from nervous breakdown, starvation, and diseases. They butchered and killed horses before their blood drained. They ate rare meat, not waiting for it to boil. A lot of them suffered from inflammatory bowel disease resembling typhoid fever. Ill people had to do their duty as well as the walking wounded. Many of those suffering from bowel disease died wearing wet, stinky trousers, and their death was dishonorable. It was Borodino again. Malik wrote that he had led submachine gunners wearing white camouflage and they approached the village unnoticed. The Nazis were shivering from a big freeze and forgot about their watchfulness. The submachine gunners sneaked up on the frostbitten enemies and quietly got rid of the sentries. There were 13 soldiers, including him, in the intelligence group. They attacked the village where the enemies were concentrated. Then the battle began, and Borodino and some of the villagers had been under the control of the Soviet soldiers by dawn. Some of the Nazis had not even expected the Soviet soldiers at all. There is a lamp on a high stand, dinner leftovers on the table. There is an officer's tunic with crossbones beneath the skull on the sleeve. A half-dressed woman is lying on the bed. She is looking at me in a daze without even blinking. I have an odd feeling which includes hatred, disdain and anger. Can you imagine it? A young Kazakh wearing a fur hat suddenly ran into her house and killed the man lying by her side and then disappeared. No, perhaps it was just a nightmare. 2 tanks, 26 vehicles, 6 cannons and other kinds of weapons were destroyed in the Borodino battles. ammunition, food, and uniform warehouses were captured. In total, the Germans lost about 400 soldiers. Chapter 3. The height of Borodino. Besides regaining control of Borodino, they had one more task, which was to maintain control of the area. They started with shelling, and in spite of winter, it got really hot. According to Gabdullin, it seemed that there were no houses which were not on fire. The first, second, and third attacks were repelled by heavy fire opened by the Panfilo soldiers from well-protected trenches, earth and timber trenches. The Germans started retreating, leaving corpses on the battlefield. Finally, they retreated to their original positions. The battle, which continued the whole day without ceasing for at least a minute, ended at dusk. It is interesting that neither the Red Army nor the Nazis applied any night tactics during the first year of the war. It was the reason why they could not take a break at night, especially during the first months. However, this battle was in early 1942 and the rules had already changed. Life forced them to use different kinds of military tactics. People did not only just observe the regulations, but tried to modify them. Panfilo soldiers repelled attacks a few times. Reinforcements were not sent and we suffered from fatigue. In the morning, suddenly bullets started whistling and submachine guns went off. Cloaked in the mist, the Germans dressed in white were approaching. Their backs were straightened and they were walking without ceasing burst fire, so we could not even raise our heads. At that time, none of us shot. No Nazis were killed. What is wrong? Panic was rising. I shouted, Malik, why don't we respond? Make those people who are alive rise. Meet this brazen chain with fire. Suddenly, a white figure rose behind a snowdrift on the right. It seemed that he was not walking, but flying miraculously over the snow. He was followed by 5 other men, behind whom there was a whole platoon or company of soldiers. The enemies were destroyed and the attack was repulsed. It was Tuligan Takhtarov, a machine gunner from Malik Gabdullin's group. He was from Ust-Kamenogorsk. He survived that attack but died a few days later. Although he had been mortally wounded, he finished off the enemies. Gabdullin caught him when he was falling. He was supporting Tuligan in his arms when he asked, "Brother, will my people be proud of me?" Malik answered, "Of course, they will." They were patriots defending their homeland, regardless of their nationality and religion. They protected their homeland and fulfilled their military duties. They protected their lands. At the cost of many lives, they managed to maintain control of Borodino. For courage and heroism, Malik Gabdullin received the award of Hero of the Soviet Union. Tuligan Takhtarov was awarded posthumously. Bauyrzhan Momyshuly did not accept this award, saying it should be given to Malik Gabdullin. Is this true? Yes. He said that this award should be handed out to those who fought in the forward positions. Demyansk offensive operations were not successful and the Nazis had broken through the encirclement by April 1942. Nevertheless, they could not launch a victorious offensive against Moscow. They could not concentrate on capturing Leningrad either. Besides this, it triggered the collapse of the Totenkopf. The elite division lost about 80% of personnel in the Demyansk battles. Epilogue: The Ray of Immortality. We never forget the order the Kazakh people gave the soldiers. Their words were in our heart when we were fighting. We were determined to be victorious. The enemy will be destroyed and the sun will shine on our peaceful country again. The Nazis captured Borodino Museum, situated in the place where Napoleon was defeated. First, they used it as a slaughterhouse and then burnt it. In spite of this, the exhibits have been transferred to Alma-Ata. In September 1942, an exhibition was dedicated to the 130th anniversary of the French invasion of Russia. It was held in the city. The Second World War had not finished yet. Demyansk events were just a little episode of the Great War in which every soldier fought their own Borodino battle and every bayonet gave off rays of immortality.